Welcome to the Jessie Freeze Show on WMTR 1250 AM, a Beasley Media Group station. Brought to you by www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey. Streaming live on WMTRAM.com and TalkStreamLive.com.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jessie Freeze. How hot is it? In some places, hot enough to test human survival. Extreme temperatures are killing people as mercury reaches dizzying levels in Phoenix, Arizona, California, Louisiana, Florida, Europe, and elsewhere. Climate change is testing the limits of human survival in Earth's hottest spots and demonstrating the extremes that are increasingly possible against the backdrop of accelerating global warming. And joining me this morning on part 2 of the hazards of climate change, Jeff Tittle, leading New Jersey environmentalist and expert on climate change, retired president of the New Jersey Sierra Club. Jeff will be discussing the wildfire haze from smoke and from Canada, which is causing untold problems for the United States, as well as the deadly flooding, a frequent reality around the world. And good to have you back this morning, Jeff Tittle.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Jeff, in recent days, China has set an all-time high of 126 degrees Fahrenheit, while Death Valley hit 128 degrees. Phoenix observed a record-breaking 19 consecutive days of 110-degree temperatures, and in the Middle East, the heat index reached 152 degrees, levels thought to be the most intense the human body can withstand. Is this the wave of the future? Is this getting worse?
Well, I think this is the new norm. This year, I unfortunately believe in 10 or 20 years, we'll be looking back as the good old cooler days. We're seeing throughout the world, not only record temperatures. I mean, right now in Greece, they're having forest fires and record temperatures there, in Italy as well, throughout Europe. But on the other side, we also are having these freak storms like we've had here in New Jersey and so many other places where we just get this inundation of rain that destroyed up in Vermont or across the river in Pennsylvania and killed people. And the cycles of heat and flooding are getting worse and more frequent. And unfortunately, we need to have to adapt because, how do people in the Southwest and that heat wave goes from California, all the way to Florida. And
right.
And then there's tornadoes on top of that again with, that we have to either adapt or we're going to have to find places in this country and around the world that we're going to have to abandon and move away from.
Yet it's hard, Jeff. Isn't it hard to adapt, though, to a tornado?
It is. I mean, it's living underground when there's warnings going on. The same thing with hurricanes. It's getting out of those areas or building houses that are more resistant with metal roofs that cost a lot more to build. I mean, there is some adaptation, but the one thing we can adapt to is that if the record temperatures outside, pretty soon we're going to have to be wearing suits like the astronauts wear and go
right.
out of space, because we may not be able to walk around our neighborhoods without actually being in an air-conditioned suit. I mean, we're getting to that point, unfortunately.
Unbelievable. Temperatures, as we said right now, are killing people, but without air conditioning, fans, or shade, and the body does have its way of cooling down to withstand heat, sweating. What happens to people without air conditioning around the world? There's so many. What will happen to them?
Not only the people without, not only suffering, many may die, but not only people without air conditioning. What about poor people who can't afford the electric bills down, in the Southwest?
Right.
People in Texas are living in one room because they can't afford to air condition the entire house. And even then they have to shut it off because they can't afford the electric rates. So even in some cases, if you have air conditioning, you can't afford it. In other cases, you don't have any if you're homeless or you're poor. And then there's places in this country where people don't have air conditioning because it's usually never gets this hot. And it means, a lot of suffering. It means illness. It means even death. And what about the people who are working in, out west in places like Arizona, picking cotton or fruit in California, or fixing a highway in Chicago or even here? You throw in the heat plus the bad air, and it becomes hazardous to be outside, especially if you're the workers that have to work and fix the electric lines when they go out and all the other things that people have to do outside. A lot of people work outside, and you
And that
suffer
is
between the heat and
dangerous, yes, because extreme heat is most dangerous for older people, people that work outside, and people with heart conditions. Are our hospitals be seeing more patients now?
well, they've seen a big uptick. I mean, there was a doubling of ER visits in New Jersey just a few weeks ago, and we had those really bad air days. And in some places there was a tripling. So yes, more people are going to the doctors. More people are just trying to stay indoors and keep cool, and more people or not breathe the air when you go out early in the day and things like that. If you live in the Southwest, you go shopping at 6 o'clock in the morning or 11 o'clock at night when things cool down. If you're a worker who works outside, or you're even a person with bad air, has bad lungs or asthma, you stay indoors and you try to go out early in the morning and things like that when the air is a little bit better and it's not as hot. This summer is having a devastating effect. And you know what? We're still in July, still got August and September, and in some
Absolutely.
places in the West in particular, September is a lot of times a hotter month than August or July.
Well, as you said, the planet has experienced record warmth lately, and the trend also extends to the Earth's oceans. The ocean and the Gulf around Florida are registering higher temperatures of up to 98 degrees Fahrenheit, which means not even a dip in the ocean can provide relief for them.
But what's it doing to the plankton and to the coral reefs and to the fisheries? We had that horrible heat wave 2 years ago up in the Pacific Northwest, where billions of fish in Puget Sound and in the salmon rivers died because the water got so hot that they couldn't live, and they died. Unfortunately, we could see not only a lot of dead fish, but also algae blooms happening as well as the water warms up, and also loss of dissolved oxygen from that, and that causing more fisheries to die, and the bleaching of the coral reefs and hurricanes. I mean, right now, this may sound a little strange, but the reason there aren't more hurricanes right now is because there's so much wind blowing the hot dust of the Sahara Desert over the Atlantic Ocean that the heat isn't rising, and so hurricanes can't form. But meanwhile, that dust is now hitting Miami. So not only are we getting hit by forest fires coming in from Canada, bringing terrible air here and smoke, but also the dust from the Sahara Desert is actually hitting parts of South Florida right now. It's protecting them from hurricanes, but it's making their air quality worse, and it's making them even hotter because the hot air can't even rise. It's getting worse and worse.
But if the coral reefs, though, that's very dangerous. The fish populations, as you say, will reduce the amount of oxygen in the water by affecting the coral reefs. This is going to not only affect our living conditions, but people's jobs. They work in these industries. What happens to them?
Well, unfortunately, some jobs we need and they have to work, and they're either going to have to get equipment that cools them, and that plus hazard pay, which is going to make that work even more expensive. But other areas, why would anybody want to go down to the beach in Miami and go swimming, or stay at a hotel in Miami between the dust coming in from the Sahara Desert to record heat and the water being so warm? So it hurts the tourism industry. What if it's that hot down in parts of California, who's going to pick the crops? Or if they pick the crops, will they live doing it? It's going to have big effects. I mean, what about no one wants to sit in an outdoor cafe when the air is bad or it's so hot? So it affects, restaurants. It affects everybody. I live in a town in New Jersey that has a lot of tourism, and when we had the really bad air days, all the outdoor cafes were closed. People who I know who play concerts at local wineries, they were all canceled. So it has an economic impact as well as a massive health impact. And that also costs us money if people get sick, for hospital bills, loss of time and work as well. We're getting into really uncharted territory when it comes to the planet and how fast it's warming, and the other impacts that we're having between floods and sandstorms and fire and smoke and everything else, that we're really entering into I call it a paved new world, unfortunately.
Well, it is a paved new world. It's a brand new world. It's a world that none of us are really used to. And it's going to be a wake-up call for all of us, because abnormally warm seawaters and temperatures can produce another powerful hurricane season, as you said, and underscoring the sobering reality that more and more Americans will endure significant compounding disasters and climate change. And even in Fort Myers, Florida, let's take that for example, it's like a ghost town because of climate climate warming. Fort Myers, Florida reached 90 degrees for 91 times in a row. That's quite a unstabling record.
Right. People go to the beach in Florida to cool off from the humidity inland and get the nice sea breeze. But when the water is 90 and the air is 90, there's not a lot of relief. And unfortunately, that's what's happening. Even this year already, Delaware Bay has been over 80 degrees many times this year already. So what about the fisheries there and here? I mean, the point that I'm making, it's happening everywhere. It's not just
Yes.
happening in places that we see in the news or we hear about. What we're seeing and hearing are the disasters, but we're not seeing reported is the changes that are happening all across the board. Like, no snow last winter, as a good example. And, snow helps recharge the aquifers and protects the soil from depletion and wind. And then you have the high heat, it dries out the soil, causes it to blow away and creates dust storms like we had in the Depression. So, there's no fooling with Mother Nature. And, unfortunately, no matter what man does, if we put the earth out of balance as we're doing, there's going to be consequences. And we're seeing them happen on a daily basis all over the planet, not just in one or two areas. It's everywhere.
We certainly are seeing them. And it seems like all of a sudden, though, this is happening. It's been going on for a long time, but all of a sudden, the wake-up call every place, countries, everything overseas, and in this country. And this summer so far is proving to be one of the hottest, if not the hottest and most dangerous in recorded history.
When you look at the 7 out of the 10 warmest summers, they've all happened within the last decade or so. So,
isn't that interesting? Earlier this week, the Persian Gulf International Airport in Iran had temperatures exceeding 100 degrees, and the air quality was saturated with humidity and so intense that they translated to heat index is really off the charts. I mean, Iran really is taking a terrible hit too.
Yeah, well, everywhere, and even in this country, it was so hot that planes got canceled, and it was so, or the smoke was so bad that planes got canceled. It's not just because of rain and storms anymore, it's because of extreme weather. It affects equipment. I was watching a TV show that was doing a live broadcast from Phoenix, and everything went out because the equipment got hot and they had to ice it down.
Right, and California and Arizona have had long stretches of heat. Death Valley had an 84-day streak of 110-degree temperatures, and just this week, a man died of heat stroke.
Yeah, I don't know why anybody would hike, in this kind of weather, and he's not the only person. But what about the impact to all the wildlife in these areas as well? The heat makes them look for water, and there's no water, there's no food, the food sources are drying up, and so it has a devastating impact on different species as well. And this heat wave all around the world is impacting humans and human health and our economy, but it's also impacting the plants that we have that are stressing them out and killing them. It's affecting many of the animals that can't cool down or live with this kind of extreme heat and a lack of food and water. So the consequences, I think, are getting worse and worse as the temperature rises. And unfortunately, unless we do something and put the brakes on dealing with fossil fuels and releases of greenhouse gases, it's just going to keep getting worse. What scientists thought would happen in 2050 is happening today. And what's going to be in 2050, what's it going to be like?
So you've mentioned a lot of states that are affected, even up in New England and all over. So where is a safe place to live, and how will people live if our food is affected and our livelihood is affected? It's going to be a completely different world if this keeps up. But is it too late? Do we have time to fix this?
Well, it's never too late. The problem is how much damage and what are the consequences. And the longer we wait, the worse it's going to be. There are places that are more moderate climates that have better places to grow food, more water. But even those places are being hit right now. Someone said there is no plan B when it comes to planet Earth. I mean, this is it. So we really have to deal with what we have. I mean, there are places, but then again, you get other issues too. Like, oh yeah, you could live in the mountains of California. It's cooler there, but they also, get earthquakes. Same thing in the Andes. Again, it used to be the Pacific Northwest was a place that never got too warm, and or even Alaska, but they're getting hot days too, and even up there. So I don't think there's no place to hide, but there are places where they'll become more livable. And I think the problem is more.
But where are those places that are more livable, Jeff Tittle? Where are they?
I think no matter what, Vermont is still a lot more livable than Texas, even with their floods.
But they recently had floods that were quite alarming, Vermont.
Right, but at least when the floodwaters recede, you still have a moderate climate. Problem in places like Texas, when you get 30 days in a row of 100-degree weather, it's not sustainable. So what I'm saying is wherever you go, there's going to be problems. The question is, can you mitigate problems in those places like Vermont? You move people out of the flood zones and expand the flood zone planning and keeping people out. But at least you're not going to have a 127-degree day there. And I think there's no place that's going to be perfect. It's finding the places like northern Minnesota that may be more milder to live in and not so hot, but there's always going to be a problem somewhere. The question is the problem fixable, or can you live with it, or is it going to be, not sustainable? And the problem is that in parts of the Southwest in this country in 20 or 30 years, you may not be able to live there. And in parts of Florida, maybe underwater. There's always going to be problems. The question is, how bad are the problems, and can you deal with or live with those problems?
My next question to you, is there enough places on Earth where everyone can squeeze in to the state that's sustainable?
No. In fact, one of the things that military planners talk about is that we're going to have wars over climate change, and we already have. I mean, the war in Syria, the civil war, was caused by super drought, forcing farmers off the land into the cities, and the cities didn't have the places to absorb them, and that led to the civil war. We have places in India and Bangladesh where there's fighting breaking out between people as people's islands are flooded. They're moving into the mainland, and there's no place for them, and creating more poverty and starvation, but it's also creating fights and other things. Same thing in Africa, too. As the Sahara Desert gets bigger, they're moving into other areas because of famine, but they're different ethnically, and those other groups don't want them in there, and you have civil wars. And so if all of a sudden 2 million Texans show up at the Canadian border for cooler temperatures, do you think Canada wants to let them in?
No.
I mean, that's the problem. That it's going to lead to a lot of dislocation. Look, the planet will still be here no matter what happens with climate change. The question is,
But will we be?
Right.
Very, very interesting question. I have to go to a break, but when we get back, we want to talk about the hazardous air quality from smoke that is choking the United States. The threats to our health is inescapable. We'll be right back with Jeff Tittle, leading environmentalist for the state of New Jersey. I'm Jessie Fries. We'll be right back.
John Graham, founder and CEO of Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, has been providing excellent service for the people of New Jersey since 1970. Fairview Insurance is a premier family-owned and operated independent full-service insurance agency based in Verona and Cherry Hill, New Jersey, working on behalf of individuals, companies, and public entities providing customized insurance plans, employee benefits, investment, and financial planning services. Fairview holds more than 30 licenses to service clients' needs in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, as well as nationally through specialty insurance programs for hard-to-place risks. Fairview Insurance Agency's knowledge of the industry, cohesiveness, and deep commitment to values have inspired confidence among their many thousands of clients. Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, Verona, New Jersey will win your trust.
For the latest up-to-date news, visit www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey, featuring politicians, attorneys, medical, celebrities, and people and issues in the news.
Fairview Insurance Agency, 25 Fairview Avenue in Verona. Find them online at fairviewinsurance.com.
Welcome back to the Jessie Fries Show, brought to you by www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey.
Welcome back. We're talking to Jeff Tittle, leading environmentalist and climate expert. And before we leave the ocean, I want to just talk about New Jersey says that the recent spate of whale deaths is linked to climate change. And since 2016, 62 whales along New Jersey coast have died. What is your take on that, Jeff Tittle?
Well, I think part of it is linked to climate change. A lot of it is basically linked to more shipping, and that in turn is linked to climate change. I think one of the problems that we've had is that the water being warmer and all the runoff from the rain has created better habitat for whales that used to, in the wintertime, for instance, go down to the Carolinas because the water was warmer. But now the water up here stayed warm all winter, and so they stayed up here. Plus, with all the runoff from all the rain, there's a lot of nutrients, so there's a lot of river herring and other things and krill that they eat, and so they're coming in close to shore to eat them. And At the same time, New York Harbor has become fastest growing and the largest harbor in the United States, supplanting even LA. And so we see more ships coming in. They're bigger ships. They're automated. They're ships with very few people on it. Also, because the weather is warm, the shipping is going on year round, but so are fishing going on year round. That's not, when it's really cold, they don't go out. And so with pleasure boats and people going out looking for bluefish or just sailing or taking their boats out. So we see a major increase in boat traffic, as well as warming conditions that have more people out on their boats, as well as keeping the whales closer to shore with more food. And I think that's really what's causing it all. And we need to do something about it. We've been working to have a bill in Congress, basically set speed limits on the waters off our coast, to have no wake zones, to limit vehicles and boats in certain areas and other things, so that we can try to limit the amount of whale and dolphin also accidents, especially for something like the right whale, which there's so few of them left. Only 12 right whales are born every year. So we need to actually monitor and protect and deal with the shipping off our coast in order to help protect the whales and other things we need to do. But I think that's part of the problem, is a lot of this is coming from boat strikes.
That's right. And it seems very legitimate reason. But Republican leaders are still questioning whether recent offshore wind energy development has anything to do with it. We want to get on to the next subject, though. Hazardous air quality from smoke is choking the United States. The cloud of smoke that inundated the East Coast, fueled by more than thousands of active fires burning across Canada, with more than half of them considered out of control, underscore how climate change, how much of a threat it is to human health, and it can transcend national boundaries. Just this past week, smoke from Canada was so bad in Washington, D.C., that you could not see the Washington Monument. What is your comment on all of this?
Well, quite frankly, even 2 days ago, the air was very bad in New Jersey, and everybody I know who was outside by a swimming pool went home early because they were tired from just breathing in all those particulate matters. The other problem that happens is when you get the smoke coming in, it acts as an inversion layer and it traps the pollution that's created here. So not only are you getting the smoke coming in from Canada and other places and you're breathing that in, but then the car exhaust and the truck exhaust and the pollution from the factories and power plants around you are not going up into the atmosphere. They're staying near the ground. And so you're breathing that too. And so even on days when we don't have the smoke, we've been getting high levels of ozone from, car exhaust, from what they call ppm 2.5, and ozone coming from just cars on a normal hot summer day when it's in the 90s. But then you add on to it the smoke that traps that in, plus brings in all the particulates there. It's, going outside and enjoying the day is almost like smoking a pack of cigarettes, a day in some of these cases. And so you think about what it's doing to us and to the people who work outside. And
right. And are there specific types of pollutants released during wildfires? And if so, what are they?
Well, there's all kinds. There's small particulates, the 2.M. There's the large-scale particulates of soot. There's chemicals like mercury and lead and benzene and other things from the different plants. And also when you have wildfires, buildings burn, cars burn. And you get toxic chemicals that come from the burning of the buildings and cars and things like that, as well as things like mercury that can be released from the burning of trees, because trees absorb the mercury that came from our power plants and stuff. And then benzene and a whole range of hydrocarbon, that are also in some cases carcinogenic, even PFAS and forever chemicals that have been absorbed will be released. So we end up breathing in a witch's brew of different kinds of chemicals. And then
there's a lot coming of smoke, Jeff Tittle. Are there any mitigation strategies or technologies that can help reduce the impact of wildfire smoke on air quality?
Well, not really. I mean, one is to try to fires out. The only other thing we can do is wear masks like we did during COVID outside. If you have asthma, take your asthma medicine and stay inside where there's air conditioning. There's really not a lot we can do unless we can find a way to stop the fires from happening in the first place. And we're not going to be able to do that unless we tackle climate change and deal with all those issues, which we're not doing. I mean, again, I always want to add that it's really up to us to put pressure on the politicians to change things and to block fossil fuel plants and to change to a green economy and to do mitigation and other things to help deal with these issues. Otherwise, it's going to keep getting worse and more people are going to get sick and even die.
Are there any studies or research initiatives dedicated to understanding the long-term effects of wildfire smoke on air quality?
There are, and one of the problems I have is the state of New Jersey, when they do their air reporting for pollution reductions, doesn't include forest fires in their air reduction plans. We know what the impacts are, and there are ways of helping to deal with the pollution by trying to limit forest fires and how we manage our lands and also reduce greenhouse gases. But we also have to acknowledge that problem when we're planning in our state dealing with our air pollution rules and laws, because we're looking the other way. We count it as a natural event, so we don't look at it like a smokestack from a factory, but we need to count it just like we count a car exhaust. We need to look at forest fires and the potential pollution from them as part of our planning and trying to reduce air pollution in our state and across the country.
Right. My last question to you is, how does wildfire smoke affect vegetation and ecosystems in addition to air quality, Jeff Tittle?
Well, in some cases, it affects more animals who are breathing it in and get sick. Bees and a lot of insects get impacted by it, can even be killed by it. You get a coating of the film on plants and that. It stunts their growth, especially in farm fields and things like that, plants we need. It has drastic effects. Plus, the chemicals that are in the air end up in the ground and in the soil and in our water, too. So it affects us that way as well. It affects plants and animals that way as well. Those pollutants that are coming in that are containing mercury and other things, and it end up getting into our ground and into us eventually.
And I don't have too much time for this, but deadly floods are becoming a more frequent reality around the world. Extreme rainfall is causing this. And one place recently had 2 days worth of rain in just a few hours. This is getting out of hand also very quickly.
Well, that's nature trying to cleanse itself. Heavy rains and hurricanes are all nature trying to adapt or try to release some of the energy that's coming from all the heat that we're pumping into the atmosphere. So again, we need to stop building in those areas, and we got to move people out of harm's way. It's the only way. We're not going to stop the floods, but we can manage them better to protect people and property by moving out of those flood-prone areas or building better in areas outside those flood areas. We have to adapt. It's not just mitigation, but it's adaptation, and we have to adapt to climate change, whether it's air pollution or how we live or water pollution, extreme heat, or flooding. It's all part of the same problem, and we need to figure out ways of stopping it and also adapting and mitigating for it.
Well, unfortunately, our time has come to a close. Jeff Tittle, our absolute expert on climate change, we thank you so much for updating us on all the recent problems we're facing with the smoke, the wildfires, flooding, hurricanes, tornadoes. We just hope that this does not continue and it comes to an end. It is with much emotion and love that the world says goodbye to one of the greatest iconic singers of all time, the beloved Tony Bennett. Although I have interviewed thousands of people, I will always treasure the wonderful interview I had with him. He was so gracious, so kind. We discussed, among many other things, his art and his astounding musical career, as well as a song that won him the first Grammy Award, I Left My Heart in San Francisco. Well, Tony Bennett, you might have left it there, but you also left it to all of us. We will miss you and love you. Rest in peace. I'm Jessie Fries. Be right back.
In San Francisco, high on a hill, it calls to me to be where little cable cars climb halfway to the stars. The morning fog may chill the air. I don't care, my love waits there. In San Francisco, above the blue and windy sea, when I come home Francisco. Your golden sun